Thank you so much, Rosemary and Justin Tang, for such a great interview.
Yeah.
It's so amazing to hear from players who do so well, especially at that newer point. Pokemon wasn't cool, but now Pokemon is actually
it's so cool.
Pokemon is actually really cool now.
I promise you the people that would make fun of you for being at a Pokemon tournament are way less important than the ones that are here. So Breakout, which is important, especially considering Lucas' team has 6 Pokemon that are grounded, and there is no chance to fake out something that's flying like the Dragonite was in that Swiss round. However, a Volt Switch is going to be nice for positioning, and more importantly, this Roaring Moon is immediately threatened by Iron Hands, which is really important. I think this Roaring Moon is going to be a huge player for Luca.
Yeah, for Luca, he has the Amoonguss and the Roaring Hands. Roaring Hands holding a booster energy to boost that attack stat. Iron Hands and Indeedee on the opposite side for Aaron. And I think Roaring Moon and Amoonguss, they just feel like the best Pokemon to maybe try and take a knockout onto that Indeedee if it went for something like that Trick Room.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Aaron lead this Indeedee and Click Protect just to bait those attacks into it again multiple times now, and this is going to be a big turn for him. If it is able to catch something like a Throat Chop into Protect, we're not going to be seeing that.
Indeedee clicking Protect, Roaring Moon also clicking Protect this turn. It is a turn of bait. I am sure Iron Hands' Drain Punch into the Roaring Moon, not going to do any damage this turn. No Terrastalizations out of the gate either. Amoonguss going for a Spore makes quite a lot of sense here, but Indeedee thankfully protected through that. So a very passive turn, but this is a mental game.
Yeah, a very slow turn there. I think the Indeedee and the Roaring Moon are the much higher priority targets on their respective sides of the field. So a smart play is just to protect both times. The Spore, unfortunately, hitting into Protect means that you don't get kind of a free turn here with one of your Pokemon, thanks to the sleeping Indeedee, but we're kind of at the same impasse we were last time, except there's a lot less safety for either player. Now you have the Rage Powder option. Big Throat Chop immediately,
it's enough for the
my
one-hit
goodness.
knockout, and that is a great way to stop Trick Room and put Luca in a great position. That Roaring Moon did not even need to Terrastalize. Iron Hands with the Wild Charge. No Terrastalization into that flying type means that it handles that like a champ. Amoonguss going for the Spore, puts this Iron Hands to sleep, and Luca is off to the races.
That went about as perfectly as it could if you were Luca. I don't think you could dream up a better turn. That huge knockout with the Throat Chop there. Just looking at the back Pokemon Aaron had, he didn't have a great switch in for that Throat Chop. Indeedee known for redirecting moves to protect partners, but there's nothing to protect the Indeedee from that Throat Chop, so it gets felled in one hit. The Armarouge coming in, you do have your Trick Room option still, but with a sleeping Iron Hands next to it, there's not a whole lot that you can do to kind of create space for this Armarouge, especially if you do opt for something like a Terra Grass. It can immediately get bonked by a Terra Flying Acrobatics. Obviously, a Throat Chop does a lot of damage to Armarouge as well. This Amoonguss still sitting pretty, not having taken any damage. Just a huge, huge start for Luca in this top 4 match.
Amoonguss looks great to Terrastalize here because the one that can hit it super effectively is asleep. However, Acrobatics does over 50% to the Armarouge. Armor Cannon will fire out into that Amoonguss, just trying to get some damage off. That's a one-hit knockout there as well. Critical hit, so a pretty, pretty nice thing, I think, if you're Aaron, probably is going to help you feel like you can maybe get some momentum back going through. Get rid of the Pokemon that can put your Pokemon to sleep is a big Trick Room counter as well. And Armarouge, it has now taken those drops and does, have to deal with its partner Pokemon being asleep for this turn.
Yeah, I think that's a very smart Acrobatics. One, if the Armarouge Terrastalizes, you just knock it out immediately. But two, it's not Terrastalizing the Roaring Moon is smart there because you preserve the Dark typing, which is going to be great. There's no chance that Iron Hands wakes up. There's no chance it has to take a Drain Punch because you've got a one-turn sleep. Though it had not taken any turns of sleep yet, so there's 0% chance that you take a bunch of damage that turn from a Drain Punch. And you have to make sure that this Armarouge really can't be damaging your Roaring Moon yet. And now you're in a very, very strong offensive position yet again because this big Flutter Mane comes in and there's not a whole lot that's scaring it. It's going to be able to take something like an Armor Cannon or Expanding Force if it has to, but as long as the Roaring Moon gets off into Acrobatics or something in that slot, again, it probably won't even need to.
Yeah, and that's a Choice Specs Flutter Mane, right? So you already know it's going to do so much damage if it chooses to. Looks like a Terrastalization here. This is going to be on Aaron's side, and it is going to be that Iron Hand. Oh, actually, I'm mixing it up here. It is going to be the Terra Flying first on the Roaring Moon just because of speed. That's the one that's going to be going first. This is going to improve the power of those Acrobatics. You're facing down 2 Pokemon that can go for Terra Grass here, so it looks really good. Flutter Mane's Dazzling Gleam is going to target down to super effective damage onto the Iron Hand so much. Armarouge does get the knockout here, and this is going to be absolutely huge, I think. If you go for that Acrobatics, you're still doing so much damage. You have the boost to that attack thanks to the new same type attack bonus. That is enough for the knockout on the Iron Hands. Wasn't even able to wake up and get anything done that it needed to. And at this point, Aaron is down to just the Torkoal.
That's really not how you wanted this first game to go if you're Aaron. That is a very smart play from Luca's end. The -1 special defense on Armarouge meant that the Choice Specs Dazzling Gleam surely would have been enough to knock it out. There's no Wide Guard on Armarouge. A lot of them do opt to run Wide Guard power, but it is just Trick Room and Protect after the Expanding Force and Armor Cannon. So no chance the Wide Guard gets blocked. That's guaranteed damage into that Iron Hand slot, and combined with the Terastallized Acrobatics, enough to take out that Iron Hands in one hit.
And you're boosting the attack of those Pokemon on the opposite side of the field with your own Sun for their photosynthesis. So you're taking a couple of big hits here. Really great game one for Luca. I'm sure he's feeling awesome with the amount of information he was able to conceal in there. We don't even know what his fourth Pokemon was, which is great for Luca, right?
Yeah.
You don't know exactly what ended up happening. I think Aaron, he needs to prioritize that Trick Room, and that is going to be his key to success in allowing him to go to a game number 3.
Yeah, I mean, losing Indeedee right off the bat, he lost so much flexibility that Indeedee is usually the kind of the defensive linchpin in these teams because it's the only thing that's trained to be a little bit bulkier, trained to be more supportive in nature. But when you just lose it immediately without getting anything done, it becomes very, very difficult for you to maneuver, especially around something like a Fluttermane and a Roaring Moon that are known to be very, very strong attackers. The Armarouge has no way of protecting itself from those Pokemon once Indeedee goes down, and they both threaten super effective damage before it terastallizes and even after with the Acrobatics from Roaring Moon.
Yeah, I'm wondering here if the Garchomp is a safer lead. If you go for something that does kind of counter both of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, you're the safety goggles and you're not the Scarf, but it's also not a speed boosting booster energy Roaring Moon.
True.
So it does probably help a little bit there. You can, you're not going to worry about taking a Spore or a Rage Powder. You could go for a Rock Slide if you were worried about the Terastallization. You could also just go for a Dragon Claw, which is going to do a good amount of damage too. Sorry, not a Rock Slide. Earthquake is still going to do a lot of damage to the Amoonguss, right?
Yeah.
But the Dragon Claw is going to do a lot of damage, probably into either one of those, and you also have the opportunity to Swords Dance, right?
Yeah.
Swords Dance and Protect. It may be a good way for you to bait out, but it depends on what Aaron wants to do. If he really wants to lean hard Trick Room, lead Indeedee Armarouge, then that's maybe going to be a better answer. I think it depends on what he finds he needs to value in turn 1.
Yeah, I think we do see the Garchomp and a Murkrow combo coming out from Aaron on this turn 1, and especially given that Amoonguss is also on the field, this Garchomp actually positioning itself very well here. It is holding that safety goggles, does have an opportunity to immediately set up Swords Dance, not have to worry about anything this Amoonguss is doing.
Yeah, and we are already seeing a switch up here. This is a Tailwind lead, not a Trick Room lead, right? Garchomp would love to have that Tailwind set up by its partner Pokemon Murkrow as well, or you now also have the opportunity to go for maybe a Brave Bird super effectively into the Amoonguss if that chooses not to Terastallize.
Yeah, and a lot of options for Aaron here. I think that Tailwind is nice because there's no Trick Room on Luca's side of the field. If you get Tailwind up, you make sure that you have the speed advantage. Like you said, that attack boost from Photosynthesis means that Garchomp will certainly be outspeeding this this Roaring Moon after the Tailwind. I think this is a really, it's a lot more in control for Aaron here because last game rather, you kind of had to worry about what Luca was doing. But in this case, if you go for Tailwind Swords Dance, a lot of the time, I don't know if there's a big risk of getting knocked out in this first turn.
Looks like a Terastallization here for that Roaring Moon into the Flying type. Does not want to get hit by something like an Earthquake when it was grounded beforehand. Murkrow's Tailwind will go off first thanks to that Prankster, allowing it to have that status move priority. Garchomp's Swords Dance still showing the speed here, and most importantly, attack will be raised by 2 stages. Roaring Moon's Dragon Dance also matching boost for boost here, but you're boosting the speed, which is really important, I think, especially. Amoonguss' Spore into the Murkrow, pretty safe play, I think, at this point as well.
I really, really like that terrifying Dragon Dance there because now the Garchomp cannot touch the Roaring Moon if the Amoonguss uses Rage Powder. The Garchomp has Earthquake and it has Dragon Claw, and there's no Rock Slide.
Safety goggles, though, right? It can still deal this.
Yeah, so you have the +2 Dragon Claw option, and Roaring Moon is not known for having great defense. Thank you for correcting me
No,
there.
it's good.
The biggest reason to use Garchomp in this matchup was safety goggles. So yeah, a really strong position for Aaron here regardless. Because of that speed, or because of the attack boosting Photosynthesis, even the Tailwind, even the Dragon Dance will not allow the Roaring Moon to outspeed the Garchomp. And this is a great switch in Armarouge here for some more offensive pressure on the Amoonguss.
Yeah, Roaring Moon pretty comfortably protecting here. The Amoonguss, Dragon Claw going into that Roaring Moon as well. Like we said, probably the safest option there. This Amoonguss was one hit knocked out by this Armarouge earlier. This Pollen Puff is not doing the damage that I think you really wanted. It would have been super effective onto that Murkrow because it's dark typing, but Armarouge handles that quite well.
I think the flying makes it neutral.
Oh, you're right.
But if anything, you break the Focus Sash,
Correct.
right? Like that's
Focus
the big
Sash
thing
is
for the
big
Focus Sash there. Armarouge coming in, the Roaring Moon Terastallized means that Amoonguss cannot turn into that Terra Water, and Armor Cannon would certainly knock it out like we saw last game. So now this is a big position for Aaron, threatening 2 KOs here on pretty important Pokemon on Luca's side of the field. A +2 Dragon Claw, it is no longer super effective, obviously, because of that Terastallization. But again, Roaring Moon's defense, not the strongest. This is going to do a lot of damage.
It's enough for a knockout, which is absolutely huge. Aaron definitely finding a way to make sure this game 2 goes a little bit more in his favor, knocking out the Roaring Moon, meaning as well that you're not going to be able to knock out the Armarouge before it attacks the Amoonguss. This expanding force into the Amoonguss, not enough to get the knockout, but you don't take the drops on your defense and special defense. Amoonguss does have a berry that it's going to munch on here and gain some of that HP back. Can still regenerate or switch in and out, so you have to maybe be mindful. Pollen Puff side targeted into its partner is not going to connect.
That's rough. I think the downside of Expanding Force is that if Psychic Terrain is not up, it is slightly weaker than Psychic, which we did see come into play here. It looks like with the damage that Expanding Force did, one Psychic could have been enough to knock out the Amoonguss. However, Amoonguss still very obviously in Earthquake or Dragon Claw range. The Flutter Mane on Luca's side of the field being choice specs mean it does not have Protect. This is a pretty free attack with Garchomp again. You have something like an Earthquake that you can do with either switching into Murkrow or protecting the Armarouge. And I don't even know if Flutter Mane has a chance to survive a +2 Earthquake from this Garchomp either.
Yeah, I mean, you could just really switch into Murkrow, allow it to take its turn of sleep, click Earthquake. Both of those Pokemon are going to take damage. You have one more turn of Tailwind, so by getting the Murkrow in, you're already getting yourself in a better position to maybe set up that Tailwind. Flutter Mane switching out here, though, for Luca, trying to not take some of this big damage. Arcanine comes in, and there's your Intimidate. A great way to maybe put a stop to some of the stuff from this Garchomp. It won't want to take an Earthquake, though. So that could be probably not as good, but you now have put it down to just +1. Armarouge going to be protecting this turn. Garchomp going for the Earthquake will, of course, not hurt its partner because its partner is not trying to get hit with an Earthquake, but both of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field should easily be enough to knock out the Amoonguss, and gets the double knockout on the Arcanine as well. Not able to get another Intimidate and bring it down to neutral. Huge for Aaron. Very different.
This Garchomp lead, such a smart adjustment, especially catching that Roaring Moon Amoonguss again. That is like the most optimal thing Aaron could have seen. The Tailwind Swords Dance immediately set him up to start taking big KOs. We see the +2 Dragon Claw just straight up one-hit knocking out the Roaring Moon, even after Terrestrialization into a Flying type. So that's actually big information because we know that one Dragon Claw, if the Roaring Moon is not Terrestrialized, without a +2 boost from the Swords Dance, is enough to knock out Roaring Moon straight up.
Okay, hear me out.
Yes.
Here's the thing for Luca, right? Okay, protect this turn. I was saying if this Terrestrialized, you could lock yourself into Power Gem with the Flutter Mane, because then you would have super effective damage onto at least 3 of those Pokemon, but no, locking into Dazzling Gleam still makes a lot of sense here. Not going to hit the Garchomp, will hit the Armarouge. Armarouge, not very effective damage, is going to handle that really well. Armor Cannon is going to do a lot in retaliation. You do start finally taking those there.
Goodness.
It's almost enough for a one-hit knockout. You take the defense and special defense drops, and that is going to maybe add up with that Life Orb chip, but you're going to be able to do enough damage even though Tailwind is over. I think you can just protect with one Pokemon, attack with the other.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that a single Dazzling Gleam knocks out a Garchomp if it Terrestrializes into this Fire type like we are seeing. That is a lot of damage from one Armor Cannon. Like Flutter Mane, we keep talking about how it has great special defense. That is almost a one-hit knockout from a neutral special attack. That is the power of Armarouge.
It is so strong, right? And it's, man, it would have been cool to see the Power Gem play. I know that's a really hard call, especially when you don't know what Aaron's last Pokemon is. So it becomes something that you're like, all right, it could be worth it, and you have to then call Protects, and it's a weird 50-50. Dazzling Gleam not going to hit into the Armarouge thanks to its Protect that it set off this turn. Garchomp handles this Dazzling Gleam like a champ as well. The Earthquake should easily be enough to settle this up and bring Aaron into a Game 3. Both of these trainers had very dominant games for each of their victories.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like we saw in that last top 8 match, the first 2 games went one player's way, and it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of breathing room for the losing player. This third game is going to be interesting as well. I think that Garchomp Murkrow switch up was great for Aaron. And again, catching that Roaring Moon and Amoonguss lead was really great. I think the Dragon Dance from Roaring Moon might have been a tad bit greedy from Luca, just because you know that this Garchomp facing you down is going to be able to Swords Dance on this turn without much worry, and especially knowing, possibly Luca thought that he could survive one Dragon Claw with that Roaring Moon, but knowing now that a +2 Dragon Claw knocks out that Roaring Moon, even if you do catch that same lead, if you lead your Roaring Moon and Amoonguss into the Murkrow and Garchomp, possibly just go straight for some damage right away, there's no chance that the Roaring Moon gets knocked out. I think if you go for something like a Terra Flying immediately, a +0 Dragon Claw shouldn't be able to take that KO.
Honestly, here's my thought, right? If you're Luca and you want to switch it up, because I don't know if there's a lot that you can do with the lead that you were originally sending out. Arcanine maybe feels like a bit of a safer lead going in. Arcanine, possibly you can Will-O-Wisp if that Garchomp does come out in turn 1 and you have the Intimidate, so you're already going to be putting it at a disadvantage, and you're going to force it to go for a Swords Dance, right? You're going to force it into a Swords Dance early. That's a turn it's not doing damage. That may be a turn that you can attack it. And then if you have the Arcanine, you can still send out the Amoonguss, possibly try and put the Murkrow Murkrow to sleep. We saw that that was pretty important going forward as well, because the Murkrow not being able to go for a couple of different things, especially like that Brave Bird, is pretty disruptive for Aaron, right?
Yeah.
That's his big Tailwind setter. And once Tailwind was done, he had already cleaned up the Pokemon that were moving faster in him than Tailwind, but it didn't really matter at that point. But I think if you can disrupt that Murkrow and maybe send in the Arcanine in the lead if you're Luca, you might have a better chance to move forward in this Game 3. But here it is, Game 3, Roaring Moon and Amoonguss here for Luca, and the Murkrow and the Garchomp. Same leads as Game 2. See what the result is.
I think Arcanine, it could be a very good like mix-up here. We did see the Arcanine come in, but a little bit too late after it was going to take an Earthquake at +1 on the switch. The Arcanine would force a Swords Dance because to like make up for that Intimidate, like you said. Also could possibly force the Terrafire to avoid a burn from Will-O-Wisp. If you haven't gone for a Swords Dance yet, if you don't want to risk, missing a KO with that Earthquake. And so I think, that Arcanine could be a big piece here because that could disrupt the Garchomp's plans. And the Garchomp single-handedly ran away with that second game.
Looks like we're seeing that Terrassalization into the Terraflying on the Roaring Moon this turn. Makes plenty of sense. That Earthquake was doing a lot of damage, and this Acrobatics is able to do a lot in return, especially if you maybe don't go for the Dragon Dance this turn and you just try and get big damage off. Garchomp going for the Protect this turn, not going to be trying to go for a Swords Dance, maybe trying to bait out something like an Acrobatics. Murkrow's Tailwind, though, is going to go off this turn, will allow for the speed of that Garchomp to be increased. Roaring Moon's Acrobatics targeted down into the Garchomp this turn, not going to go through that Protect. Amoonguss, though, still has the opportunity to Spore into that Murkrow, and that will at least disrupt it for a bare minimum of 1 turn.
Yeah, that's a really smart Acrobatics. I think instead of going for a Dragon Dance there, you just get some damage on the Garchomp immediately. And again, a smart Protect from Garchomp, I think maybe you don't want to trade something like a Swords Dance for a lot of damage from that Acrobatics, because certainly would have done a huge chunk. And possibly even like Acrobatics plus Pollen Puff could be enough for a knockout on that Garchomp, depending on how they're trained. Like, the Roaring Moon, you really cannot underestimate its power. We've seen it do way too much damage multiple times throughout the course of this day.
Look at how much that Dragon Claw does without the Swords Dance. Just over 50% of the damage onto that Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon's Acrobatics is going to fire right back off into the Garchomp. Does so much damage there. Rough Skin will help a little bit just to get some extra damage back off. Amoonguss going for the Spore into the Murkrow. Once again, predicting a switch here. You can't Spore into that Garchomp because of those safety goggles, but a Pollen Puff might have knocked out.
I think a Pollen Puff maybe would have knocked out Garchomp there. I think that's a fine Spore, though. Maybe you don't want to keep Murkrow on the field. We did see a Murkrow immediately switch out last game into that Armarouge, so possibly trying to capitalize on that swap. But that's so much damage from Acrobatics. One Dragon Claw should be enough to finish it off now, but now you have your Garchomp that cannot be, no longer can you Swords Dance here. Like, anything should knock you out. So you don't have to deal with a +2 Garchomp anymore, so this is already a much better start for Luca. Even though his Roaring Moon took a lot of damage, it has done more damage than it did last game, which is to say none.
Yeah, Roaring Moon protecting this turn, probably trying to allow for this Amoonguss to finish off the Garchomp. Garchomp goes for a greedy Swords Dance here. If you take this Pollen Puff, that is enough to take the knockout. Murkrow stays asleep. No Brave Bird to help this turn. Really interesting to see Aaron call it Spore. So no punishment on that Garchomp for going for the Swords Dance.
Oh my goodness. I mean, maybe Aaron heard me, and I said you can't Swords Dance anymore, and he said watch me.
Watch me.
That is so big, because now Dragon Claw or Earthquake threatens a lot of damage. The Murkrow has a very strong chance of waking up this turn. A big Brave Bird into that Amoonguss, again, cannot be reduced. The damage cannot be reduced by Terastallizing, because that is no longer an option for Luca. There's so much more threat here on Aaron's side of the field because of that huge Swords Dance.
Arcanine coming in now. The Intimidate will be nice onto this Garchomp. Will bring it down to just +1.
Only
Still
+1.
Great turn to click Earthquake, possibly Dragon Claw into the Amoonguss. Over 50% of its damage will eat its berry here. Gain back a good chunk of it. Now would be a time to get some a wake up from this Murkrow, who does wake up this turn. Going for the Brave Bird, targets into the Arcanine here. Still does a good chunk of damage. An Earthquake, I think, is going to be huge on this next turn. Amoonguss going for a Spore, putting this Murkrow to sleep once again, but Extreme Speed is now your fear.
Yeah, Extreme Speed. You have to fear Extreme Speed. I believe we did see Indeedee in the back for Aaron, though. And I think there's one more turn of Trick Room left. Not Trick Room, Tailwind left.
Tailwind just petered out, actually. So now would be the turn to send in that Indeedee. Yeah,
so Indeedee would block any Extreme Speeds. The Roaring Moon could come in and I believe still be faster than Garchomp. It is that attack boosting nature, but given how strong the Roaring Moon's attack is, it does have the opportunity to still be a little bit faster than Garchomp. This might be a really risky switch, but no Indeedee coming in. Extreme Speed is enough.
Extreme Speed takes out the Garchomp this turn. The Flutter Mane able to come in as well. You know you're going to have that mandatory turn of sleep this turn. No pressure coming back from that Murkrow. You could have definitely, I think the Indeedee swap, that was a big read that Aaron was trying to make there.
Wow, that is a big turn for Luka. That, like, I don't know, because you lose so much potential there. I like, the Flutter Mane coming in means that it probably would have, not probably, it certainly would have been knocked out by an Earthquake had it happened. You have to switch your Indeedee on an Earthquake. Like, that's the one downside. But I think knowing that you possibly take 2 knockouts there, only the Roaring Moon would have survived the turn had an Earthquake gone off there. That would have been a massive turn for the Garchomp, but Protect going into the Extremes, Extremes you're going to Protect, rather, instead here.
Looks like Luka probably isn't predicting that Indeedee came. Murkrow wakes up, goes for the Tailwind, though, this turn. You have to imagine that if Luka is seeing this Murkrow, he's probably not predicting the Indeedee in the back. This Shadow Ball, though, into the Protect. You now at least see what this Flutter Mane has locked into with those choice specs. You can still have your Terastallization option. You have that for all of the 3 remaining Pokemon on the field. Armarouge is probably a pretty safe answer as long as you can take care of the Arcanine. So I think switching into Indeedee Expanding Force, getting that damage down onto the Arcanine and maybe getting that knockout allows you to have a very comfortable Grass Terra on the following turn.
Yeah.
You just still have to deal with this Shadow Ball, which could do super effective damage onto the Armarouge.
Yeah, this is a very dangerous position to be in now if you are Luka, because this Armarouge, having that Flash Fire, it cannot be Flare Blitzed.
Oh, yes.
If the Indeedee comes in, it cannot be Extreme Speeded because of the terrain, so Arcanine cannot damage this Armarouge should the Psychic terrain go up. It does not have Snarl like we've seen on some Arcanines earlier in the day, and a Shadow Ball certainly would not be enough damage to knock out Armarouge if it does Terastallize into a Grass type like we're about to see, and a big Expanding Force. There's nothing that can switch into this Expanding Force anymore. Roaring Moon is no longer a Dark type, and I have a hard time seeing a way that Luka prevents a huge amount of damage from this Expanding Force in this turn.
Yeah, here comes the Terastallization with that Terra Grass onto that Armarouge. It is not going to want to take some super effective damage from that Flutter Mane on the opposite side of the field. It is now helped out by its partner Indeedee, who I don't think Luka was expecting to see here.
No.
Arcanine's Extreme Speed, not going to go through that Psychic terrain. Expanding Force, double target now thanks to the Psychic terrain on the field. Enough to knock out the Arcanine. Flutter Mane just hangs on as well. That is an absolutely huge turn for Aaron to keep that hidden in the back. Shadow Ball now targeting into the Armarouge. You need some big damage here, and it is not enough for the knockout, but it does get really close.
It does come super close. I don't know if that's enough, though. Armarouge will survive 1 more turn of Life Orb Recoil, and I don't know if you need more than 2 Expanding Forces to finish this game. You do have Protect on both the Moongus and Roaring Moon, so there are ways in theory you could force 2 Expanding Forces out and still have 1 Pokemon left standing. The Flutter Mane obviously will get knocked out by 1 more. It does not have Protect, but if you can, for example, bring something in, protect it, take the knockout on the Flutter Mane, then you protect the other slot, and the next time Armarouge attacks something, it just gets knocked out. You can alternate Protects, force it to knock itself out, and then try to deal with whatever's left. I don't even know, because the Indeedee still has Psychic, can do a lot of damage to anything left on the field. Like, it's going to be really tough for Luka, but there are routes that you can possibly clay your way back into this.
This Roaring Moon that had disappeared right at the start of this game was not feeling safe before, probably still not feeling terribly safe, but knowing it has to come back in here and maybe take this big damage. Roaring Moon protecting this turn, trying to get that Life Orb chip down on this Armarouge. Indeedee going for the Psychic, though, targets down into that Flutter Mane, and the thing is that now you are not going to take any Life Orb recoil because you're going to hit into a Protect, so that is a great Psychic instead of going for something like a Follow Me.
That is so big. Now you can no longer, Protect, stall out this Armarouge. I'm looking at Armarouge in the face and can't remember its name. You can't stall out its Life Orb anymore. If you do protect a Moongus, like for example, and the Roaring Moon gets knocked out by Expanding Force, Armarouge sticks around. We've seen it one-hit knock out the Moongus with an Armor Cannon. Certainly Expanding Force to do a lot more damage. This is so well managed by Aaron. That Murkrow coming in very clutch here. We did see it stay asleep for a few turns that first time I went to sleep, but that 1 turn wake up to set up the Tailwind for this Armarouge sweep in the back. Massive, massive flip in momentum in Aaron's favor.
I think you need a double protect if you are the Roaring Moon, right? That's probably your biggest opportunity here. Murkrow switching in for the Indeedee is going to allow for another. A double protect is not going to go through, though, for this Roaring Moon. Does fail. Amoonguss does get the protect off, so that is at least 1 tick of this damage from the Life Orb. Expanding Force should easily knock out this Roaring Moon here. The fact that you're not doing damage onto the Amoonguss is kind of helpful, but Amoonguss is not offensively ready, I think, to take on the 3 Pokemon on Aaron's side of the field.
And a very, very smart Murkrow switch there, too. Like, let's say, for example, the Roaring Moon does get a double protect. In this case, Armarouge does go down to 1 more turn of Life Orb damage, but Tailwind petering out here means that Murkrow easily could have set up Tailwind again, again. The Roaring Moon would not be able to outspeed and KO the Armarouge because this Murkrow came in proactively. So very, very smart switch there just to make sure he locks down this endgame. And it looks like a Brave Bird and a combination of Armor Cannon or Expanding Force will be sending Aaron Clemens into the finals here in Knoxville.
The Expanding Force here into that Amoonguss is going to seal the deal here for Aaron. A great adjustment from that game one is going to send him to be your first finalist for the Knoxville Regional Championships, and he does not have an easy matchup waiting for him with whoever comes out of that other side of the bracket.
Yeah, he will be playing either Justin Tang or Nick Navarro. We will find out after our very next match, but so well played by Aaron Clemens here. That first game, pretty disastrous for him. He couldn't really exert any pressure after losing that Indeedee immediately, but the Garchomp Murkrow combination proving to be so strong for him, and that second game immediately setting up a